Welcome to the Startup Help Desk, your source for answers to questions about starting businesses, building businesses, and the meaning of life. Your panelists here are all experienced founders, entrepreneurs, and investors, people who have built businesses, sold businesses, and made a ton of mistakes. We are here to share decades of experience across hundreds, if not thousands, of companies with you, answering questions that you have. My name is Sean Burns. I've been a founder for about 20 years, starting companies like Flurry and Outlier.ai. I've been an investor, a coach, and a mentor to hundreds of companies. These days, I like to share everything I'm learning on my newsletter, The Breaking Point, and here on the podcast. I am joined by a bunch of illustrious founders who somehow find a way to put up with me and my sense of humor. Ash and Nick.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ash Rust, and I'm a pre-seed investor based in San Francisco. I'm mostly invested in B2B companies based in the US, UK, and Canada through my fund, Sterling Road. I've also worked at places like Trinity Ventures as an entrepreneur in residence and Bullpen Capital as an advisor. Before investing, I was also an entrepreneur, most notably an early employee at the social media analysis company Klout, as well as the CEO and co-founder of SendHub. These days, I spend most of my time coaching founders, and I've helped more than 1,000 startups over the years.
Hey, this is Nick Melionis. I'm co-founder and CEO of a startup called Navi. We help folks learn innovation skills, solve mission-critical problems, and start companies. This is my second startup. Along the way, I've supported hundreds of startups, innovators, and founders. I have a blast debating these startup questions, and I can't wait to jump into what we have for today. Thanks so much.
And on the Startup Help Desk, all the questions we answer, for those of you who know, are submitted by you or people just like you. So if you have a question, we would love to answer it on a future episode. Find us at thestartuphelpdesk.com or on Twitter at thestartuphd. That's thestartuphelpdesk.com or on Twitter as thestartuphd. All the questions today were submitted by people just like you. And in fact, these questions are all about pricing. We all sell something, whatever it is, and figuring out the price is one of the great unanswered questions of our time. So we will do our best to answer all these questions, which cover the range of issues around pricing. Before we get started, it's key to keep in mind this is a hard topic. There's no simple answers. We'll do our best. Pricing is just hard.
I have the right answers.
Well, this podcast is free, so clearly you could argue we know nothing or everything about pricing. It's unclear. Let's hit that first question. Ash, I'm going to put you on the hot seat since you clearly know everything about pricing. The first question is, how do I decide on a price for my new product?
So I'll just preface this by saying I think this is one of my most controversial tactics, and it gets a lot of feedback, let's say, whenever I post about it on social media. So I like to think about it for B2B businesses pretty much exclusively. And for the first customer, you are going to give it away for free. The goal is just to get some usage on the business. They don't even have to be in the correct customer profile for you to count them as that first free customer. Second customer, I like you to charge $1. That $1 or whatever they can just get approved, the lowest possible price without any kind of hassle, essentially. The reason for doing that is you just want to go through the process of the purchase, security, legal, etc. Those might be a hard place for you to get through. They might be difficult parts of the sales process. So you need to learn about them early, find out what the barriers are without actually having budget as an issue. And then once we get to the third customer, then you can charge what you consider to be a fair price, in my opinion. Now, most entrepreneurs chronically undercharge for their product because they are afraid that people will say no on the basis of price. And so by the time we get to the fourth and fifth customer, I want you to 3x whatever you charge the previous customer. Yes, 3x. And Sean is usually particularly upset about this whenever I post about it. And he says it's too aggressive on the 3x. And my response to that, in advance of the harassment that I'm about to experience for all to witness, is that you can negotiate down. If they wince, if they say, oh, no, that's too much, then that's totally fine. Just negotiate the price down to a reasonable level whenever they say yes. Because never in the history of pricing negotiations has someone seen a price and said, I'm so offended by the price that you've quoted me, I never want to speak to you again.
Oh, no, that actually happened to me. Actually, so Ash, quick story. I was selling to a U.S. airline, and the airline procurement processes are very long. If you've never sold to an airline, I don't suggest it. But if you do, it can take a long time. And when we started out, I can't remember what our price was, but by the time it got around to signing the contract, it was literally like, I don't know, a year and a half later, our prices had gone up. They'd actually doubled. And so I told them the price was double. And they told me that that was so unconscionable, that our ethics as a company were so distasteful that they didn't want to be associated with us anymore.
No.
So it has happened, and it happened to me.
I think that sounds more like it was a terrible customer that you didn't want anyway, and they were looking for a way out. But yes, maybe in 1 in 10,000 cases, if you are in fact the world's unluckiest CEO, the one person who has a story about Steve Jobs chewing them out over the phone so loud that their employees could hear them, then yes, you might also be so unlucky as to find a customer who is offended by a price quote such that they'll never speak
Most
to you
of my
again.
questions are not very flattering about my leadership style. I need to work on better stories. Nick, what do you think?
Or that
man?
you're as lucky as a planet that gets hit by meteors every 15 minutes.
Yeah. So, Ash, I like the way you framed it. Ultimately, I want to start from that fair price perspective. So, in terms of the free, $1 for customer 2, and then fair price and beyond from there. Ultimately, I think a key thing for folks to understand, and Sean mentioned this at the outset, this pricing is very challenging. It is extremely likely you're going to get your first price wrong. And so here are some tips that you can be able to consider to get at least in the right kind of ballpark when it comes to this entrepreneur fair price as you're starting your pricing journey. One is find comparable products and price yours similarly. If you're entering a market that is competitive and you've got some pretty clear analogs that exist, then you can be able to price your product in a similar manner, or at least understand what kind of value folks see for your product. So consider that. A second piece of this, and much of the conversation we've already had focuses on understanding your target customer's budget. Ultimately, as you're doing discovery, you're learning about your customers and you're investigating what you can charge. You can also ask questions to be able to understand what kind of thresholds are meaningful when it comes to getting approvals for your product. And so you can probe on that by asking some good questions around budgets to understand what will lead to a yes. So consider that. The other golden ticket across all of this, of course, is you're delivering some form of value to your customers. And so you want to think about what's the value you're providing. Are you helping them generate more money? Are you helping them reduce costs? Understand, do some projections in terms of what kind of value you anticipate being able to deliver. And that'll give you at least a ballpark idea about the value you're providing. And then, of course, you'd want to price it based off of a percentage of that value. Likely not a huge percentage. Otherwise, they're not going to say yes because you're going to be eating into the value that they get. But ultimately, base it off of some form of value. That's how I like to think about it.
Nick has a good point. It turns out if nobody ever pays it, it's not really the price. So just keep that in mind.
Exactly right.
Well, Ash and Nick, a quick follow-up question. Is there anything that you would say would be different around new categories of products? Something that's radically new where there aren't really comparables out there, the customers aren't used to buying similar products? Or is it the same as this? You follow that same playbook? Is there something different about these new categories of products?
I mean, it's always worth trying different pricing methods if you're getting a positive customer response from it. But I'm just a real advocate for simplicity, because if you have a complex pricing system or a innovative pricing system or a new pricing system, then that's going to be work to execute properly. And if it goes wrong, then, is that really the area that you want to be spending time innovating? Probably not.
Yeah, I like that. I think ultimately the golden ticket for all of this is, especially if you can understand the budget of your target customer, then at least you can understand what that ballpark should be for this first instances of pricing. And then, of course, once you actually prove that your product is providing value, solving the right kind of problem, then you can start iterating and understanding pricing and perhaps get a little bit more creative. But creativity around pricing on day one is likely not going to be the engine of great outcomes for you.
Fair enough. Well, let's keep making sure we get through more pricing questions. Ash, what else is on our question queue for pricing today?
Okay, next question is, I worry that I'm not charging enough. How do I know if I should raise prices?
Yeah, this is awesome. I'll hop on this one to start. So I think there's really two components to this. One is a question of whether you should raise prices. And then, as Sean alluded to earlier, part of it is can you successfully actually raise prices? So is your product solving the problem well enough to raise those prices? So there's two pieces to it. I think generally speaking, if you're trying to figure out, should I raise prices? The general theme here is if your targets are saying yes over and over again to buy and you're not getting a lot of no's, that's likely a sign that you've priced this too low. And so that would be part one of this. The other thing to consider is if your business is just actually not making enough money, you're not making enough money to sustain your business, that is either a signal that you need to raise prices, you need to just sell more volume, or potentially consider a pivot. But big picture, if you're not sustaining your business, raising prices is likely one avenue that you need to test to be able to figure out if you're on the right track. So I would say just to start from there, those are a few things to consider when it comes to raising prices. Sean, what's your take?
Oh, I'll make it even easier. In general, yes, I think everyone should raise their prices. The number of companies that are charging too much are just so few and far between. Now, that doesn't mean you should raise your price or you have to, but it means you probably should. You don't have to, but you probably should. Now, let's make it a little easier on you. As Nick said, if it's too easy of a yes for customers, that means it's not expensive enough. You want it to be not so expensive they're getting to know. You want it to be somewhere in the middle ground where it's a consideration, it's a little painful, but it's valuable. But here's the kicker. The thing about pricing that people don't think about, they think too much about price at the moment somebody's buying the product. But subscription services, I buy the product and I live with them for a while. What you want is when that person buys that product, you want the value they get to constantly go up over time. So that price they pay seems cheaper and cheaper the longer they're using your product. That helps you in two ways. One, it means your renewal rate will be a lot higher because they'll look back and say, wow, I paid X for this, but I got 10X the value. This was a great deal. But it also means you have a lot of chances for upselling the customer. So even if you don't want to raise your prices, you can make more from existing customers by having them pay you more. Maybe you have tiers of service, you have add-ons they can buy. But what unlocks all of that is your value going up. If your value is always going up over time, meaning people get more value, maybe more users at the company you're selling to are using it, or whatever it is, the network effect is there, people are getting more value. You can raise prices, maybe not up front, but at least over time, you can do upselling. You can make more money if the value does
Sean,
not go up over time.
Aren't you teaching people here to undercharge initially on the premise that they can just charge more later?
This is good. I didn't mean to imply that. I just meant that if your value goes up, you have chances to make more money later. But you definitely want to make sure you're getting your money's worth up front. But it gives you the chance to also get your money's worth later on too. You kind of get both sides. You don't want to sell yourself short up front because there's no guarantee they'll renew. There's no guarantee they'll upsell. So if you sell the product up front at a price point too low, you're losing out. My point was more that if you keep making sure you have compounding value, not only do you get your money up front, you can make more money later, which is always a good thing. That was a good clarification, Ash. Always looking out for those confusing points as I slew knowledge left and right. Okay.
Right. Where as the proverbial hits the fan left and right.
As the knowledge is hitting the fan, that's our new motto.
It's certainly something hitting the fan. That's what's going on, folks.
Okay, Nick, we're in danger of talking about pricing a lot. Let's make sure we keep talking about pricing. What else do we have on our question queue for today?
All right, let's do it. So one question we got from a founder is the following. My prices are going up. Should I raise prices on existing customers or only new customers? Sean, you want to kick things off there?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I get this a lot. I think this somewhat comes down to a question of your style. So there's obviously two things you can do. You could raise the prices on existing customers or keep them at whatever their initial grandfathered in price is and buy it in. Anyone who's ever bought cable or cell phone service knows that companies typically will grandfather in old prices because they don't want to risk losing you as a customer just because the price went up. Other cases, they raise the price and you're either in or you're out. Netflix does that all the time. So it's a question of how you want to deal with your customers. Do they have high switching costs? Are they pretty locked in? Those sorts of things. I personally have never raised prices on existing customers, mostly because I want those early customers to have some reward for being early customers. But also it's a great way to lock them in because when it comes, let's say your price
and you're
doubles,
allergic to money.
And I hate money because I have so much of it. Where are you going to put more of it? I have no place to store it all.
Right. This is what happens when you live in Berkeley, folks, for too long. Socialism it gets everybody over time.
But there are two benefits of not raising prices to customers. One is that it means that renewals are usually easier if that's important to you, because they look at it and say, "Wait, if I was to jump in tomorrow, or I let this contract expire, I'd have to buy in at a higher rate, so I'm saving a lot more money." The second is it's a great forcing function. I used to, my last enterprise software company, we used to double prices every quarter. And the great thing about that was existing customers didn't have their price doubled. It was just doubled for new customers coming in the door, which meant it was a great forcing function for signatures. People were very motivated to sign that contract before the end of the quarter because they didn't want the price to go up on them. And it worked incredibly well as a function for getting people to sign.
Did anybody
contracts.
talk about your ethics at that time?
No, but they did talk about their ROI.
Oh, really? I thought that's what was coming out of those price increase discussions.
All joking aside, I literally signed a contract at I don't know, must have been 8:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve because a company wanted to get that contract signed so the price wouldn't go up the next day.
Nice.
But
it was already past the time. It was the New Year in Sydney by then, presumably.
That is true. I let it slide. That's because I'm a loving person, Ash. I'm really looking out for my customers.
That's folks. Generous Burns. That's what they call him.
Well, I do let you guys be in the podcast. That's nice of me, right?
That's right. It's a good place to start.
One day we'll have to declare the source of funding around this.
It's all of Nick's Bitcoin wealth, all those islands that he's selling.
Oh, that's
can't
too
sell
good.
pancake tokens anymore. They're illiquid.
That's right.
Where was I? Oh, one more thing about not raising prices on existing customers, which is that let's say that you don't feel like you can raise price on existing customers, that if you raise price, they will churn out or leave or whatever. Is there a way for customers to pay you in something that's not cash? And so it's very common to go to customers and say, hey, the price is going up for everyone else. We're happy to keep the price the same for you as long as you do some case studies or referrals or film some videos for us. So they essentially can create marketing for you or other sorts of value, which is not dollars, but can help you acquire another 10 customers, which pays for itself. So it's a choice. I have chosen not to do it. There's good reasons to do it. I'm sure Ash will disagree. But anyway, that's the breakdown for not raising prices. Ash, what do you think, man?
Yes, I'm going to rightly disagree. So it's okay to raise prices if your costs are going up. You were probably undercharging before anyway. And remember that some customer churn is okay. You're making more money per customer as it is. So do the right thing. Warn customers in advance as much as possible. Help them with offboarding if they want to leave. That's also okay. There's no need to be, difficult about this. But in times of uncertain pricing for your cost of goods, you want to be in the business of raising your public prices, raising your existing customer prices, or, better yet, especially in terms of public prices, just take them offline altogether. So yes, raise prices on existing customers, just give them plenty of warning and don't be difficult about them offboarding. That's okay. Don't be afraid of that kind of churn because you're making more money per customer. And then if you are in the business of raising prices, then you probably want to take it offline in most cases.
Well, so Ash, as an investor, let me ask you a follow-up question, which is, if a company's faced with the question of raising prices, which would increase their margins, which would probably make them more attractive as an investment, but in process of raising prices, they're going to lose some customers, so their revenue will go down or their growth may go flat. What's the right decision from the perspective of investors evaluating it? Do you want to keep your revenue growth going, or do you want to increase your margins? Like, if that's a choice you have to make.
Well, I'm comfortable with you increasing your margins because I care more about the future, right? Once we're in this particular state of now charging this higher price, what is your ability to grow from there? Do you have a repeatable sales model that is working at this new price? If so, great. If that new price doesn't work and your sales model is now failing, then I have questions about it for sure.
I agree about the failing part. Absolutely. Nick, what do you think, man?
Yeah. Well, Sean, Ash, I got another follow-up question for you. So how much of this depends upon having existing competitors whose prices are public and then ultimately knowing that there is this flight risk to some existing competition? Do you consider that at all? Or is it still a function of saying, We're not worrying about the competition. We're making these decisions based off of our business and our business alone.
I think assessing competitors' pricing to determine your own is one of the most dangerous mindset issues founders have in this particular topic. If you think about what happens when there's products that are out there that are incredibly high priced, perhaps 2 or 3x what is the market standard, that actually generates press for those products in a lot of cases. So your instinctive response to what might be a nauseatingly high price is actually very, very different than how the market will respond. And so, I always just default to that higher price and again, be willing to negotiate down.
I actually agree. I think if your price is determined at all by your competitors, either in your mind or the mind of your buyers, you're already losing in the market. Mm-hmm. That you have to be able to set the price based on the value you're offering if you want to maximize your future growth. Because otherwise, if that's not true and you start to do well, your customers will just drop their prices and they'll hurt you. And that's not a position you want to be in. You don't want to be at the mercy of the market. This happens a lot in the commoditized goods, obviously, where your margins are razor thin and somebody like Amazon sees your product selling really well in their marketplace and they launch an identical copy product that they're manufacturing themselves. And you're done because there's nothing you can do. You can't compete with them on price and margins, those sorts of things. So yes, you do not want the competitors controlling your price. You have to stand on your own, and it's really important you do that. I realize that one thing we haven't talked about with price though is and you touch on this, Ash, is the perception question, which is there's also a luxury goods paradox where if you charge too little, people might consider it not to be as high quality as a product that's a higher price.
Right.
Do you guys have any context on that question? Like, how do you make sure...
I saw a great news article about this today. There's someone who's been buying dresses from Zara and then taking off the labels and selling them on their own website for 10x the price as sustainable goods. It's genius.
So good. I mean, I think it speaks to something that, of course, factors into this quite a bit. There's a psychological element where you can be able to signal to the market your value through your price. And so, of course, price tells a story. It is something that can influence buying decisions. And part of that story is we offer a product that solves a great problem and delivers a lot of value, and we price it accordingly.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's really, really easy to fall in the trap of being worried if somebody will buy it. And you completely lose sight of the fact that the price is part of how people evaluate what you're doing. In fact, at my last company in the world of business intelligence, if you don't charge enough, people think that it doesn't work. And especially if you're in the AI space, people expect these things to be expensive because they're typically expensive. So even if you have a way to develop it and offer it at low price, people will immediately assume it doesn't work, which I was very fascinated to learn and was very surprising to me because for me, it's counterintuitive. But keep in mind, your price is a feature of your product. It's how people perceive it as much as how much money you make off of it. So adjust accordingly. And of course, free is a price. And this podcast is free. Take for that what you will. I don't know. Overall, we've answered a lot of questions about price, so I'll leave it up to you. But that brings us to the end of our question answers about price. Ash and Nick, as always, thank you. The price was right.
Absolute blast.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you all.
And no pushback on my Price is Right pun. That's how you know I'm making progress, folks.
That's right. More SEO is in motion. That's for sure.
In it to win it. If you have questions for a future episode of our podcast, we would love to hear it. Find us online at thestartuphelpdesk.com or on Twitter at thestartuphd. All the questions we answer were asked by you, so please ask more questions so we can have more episodes. I love chatting with these guys and we love making the podcast. But for now, the Startup Help Desk is closed. We will see you at the next episode. In the meantime, good luck in building your business.